Let's grab your block or your pillow, whatever prop you have. We're going to lift up into a supported bridge pose. So the block is going to land right underneath your sacrum. You got to find kind of that happy medium where the pelvis can be neutral. We can feel those two pelvic points cinch in like we're drawing in our drawstring. And we're going to start with just hip flexion. So you'll pick one foot up at a time. It does not matter how far the thigh comes to the belly. What we want is to right away notice any shifting or rocking to the opposite side of the pelvis. We want to try to mitigate that with stability. So the sacrum right in the center stays down. As we alternate, we don't rock to one butt cheek and then the other. You can add on by adding some of that resisted hip flexion where you bring hand to thigh, try to push it away. So we really have to work the stability of the glutes, the pelvis, those low belly muscles. A couple more times. Holding that pelvic bowl so still. Now let's press both feet into the ground. Lift off the block and just lower down one vertebra at a time. Now the block is going to come between the knees or the thighs for our regular bridge pose. You can keep hands on the pelvis, hands can be on the thighs, but let's push down to rise up. Use the glutes and let's visualize that bowl. If we're tipping forward, that's going to look like the tailbone kind of tipping toward the ground. If we're tucking under too much, we don't want that either. So nice and long in the low back. Let's challenge the stability here by lifting one heel at a time. So we keep pressing into the big toes, the balls of the feet, and notice if the hips are shifting here, like one pelvic point is getting higher than the other, and really try to feel pubic bone zipper to belly, pelvic points draw in toward each other. Both feet come down, we'll stay in our low bridge and just stretch out the left wrist. Big breaths into the side and back ribs as you gently hug in on the block. Switch hands. Stretch out the right wrist. Long through the low back. Hands come back to your thighs or your pelvis. Let's tiptoe the spine down like we're really trying to lower one vertebra down at a time. And once we get down, we're going to take the block out. We will not use it for our core work today. Hands behind the head, elbows up or elbows in tight toward the forehead. Huge breath into the side and back ribs. Pay attention to the sacrum. Keep it down as you exhale, lift off the shoulder blades. Right away, we want to feel that drawstringing in of the two pelvic points. Inhale and lower. Exhale, keep the sacrum down as you lift up. Slight zippering up of the pubic bone to the belly. Inhale to lower. Adding on, exhale, lift up without yanking on the head. Zipper the pubic bone up. We pick up the left foot, hip flexion like we did on our block supported bridge without shifting over to that left butt cheek or left side of the pelvis. Foot comes down, inhale and lower. Exhale, lift. Pelvic point cinch in. We pick up the right foot, knee over the hip or somewhere around there without rocking to the right side of the pelvis. Foot comes down, inhale, lower. Exhale, lift up, not pulling on the head. Draw those pelvic points in. Pick up the left foot, hip flexion. Now stay here. Push into the right big toe. Lift just the right heel without arching the back or popping the belly up. Lower the right heel, lower the left foot. Inhale and lower. Exhale, lift up. Draw those pelvic points in. Pick up the right foot, hip flexion. Hold that sacrum steady as we push into the left big toe. Lift the left heel. Lower the heel, lower the foot. Inhale, lower. We're going to do one more add-on. Exhale, lift up without yanking on the neck. Zipper pubic bone to belly. Pick up the left foot, knee over the hip. Now keep this position, the knee bent. We're gonna abduct, so the knee moves away from the body, really hard not to rock over that left butt cheek. Bring it back, lift the right heel without popping the belly up. Lower the right heel, lower the left foot, inhale and lower. Last time, exhale, lift. Draw those pelvic points in. Pick up the right foot, knee over the hip. We abduct the leg away from the body, holding that sacrum steady. Bring it back, pushing to the left ball of the foot, lift the left heel. Lower the heel, lower the foot, inhale and lower. Let's hug the knees in, take a little rock side to side or up and down. And we're gonna come to quadruped. Have that block with you. We're gonna place it on our sacrum so that we can really continue that feeling of balancing the bowl, not tipping or tucking. So from quadruped, knees in nice and tight, shoulders right over your wrist, or you can come to fist. We'll slide left toes back. Feel your pubic bone zipper up toward the belly. Our goal is to hold the right thigh bone and right hip the same. So really strong, really stable as we float the left foot up. Notice if the pelvis has tipped. Have we lifted the tailbone or tucked it? Can we stay neutral? From here, we're going to abduct the leg out to the left, just like we did on our backs. Now we try to cross it over toward the right. Adduct, ADD. Abduct out to the left. Really small. Adduct over to the right, holding the pubic bone the same and the sacrum the same. Try that a couple more times. Abducting over to the left, away from the body. Adduct toward the right, crossing over the body. Now bring it back to neutral. Bend the knee and just lower the knee down like it's hovering off the ground, and we'll circle the hip. So how much movement can we get in that hip joint without the pelvic bowl moving? So holding that feeling of kind of zippering up the pubic bone to the belly, cinching those pelvic points in as we circle both ways. Holding that right hip and thigh still. Back to quadruped, adjust as needed. Really zipper the pubic bone up, pick up the front ribs. We slide the right toes back. Hold steady where the pubic bone and tailbone are and float the toes up. We abduct over to the right. This might be so small. And then cross it over toward the left. So it moves away from the body, hip abduction, AB. And then it crosses over the midline of the body, hip adduction, ADD. Keep going. Hold the pelvic bowl. So still. Hold that left hip and thigh strong and stable. Now bring that right knee back down, hover it off the ground, and let's circle. Try at least a couple circles, both directions, pressing evenly into the hands, strong arms. Imagine trying to tighten a drawstring of sweatpants, like pulling that drawstring in. Lower down, take the block aside. Let's cat-cow. Letting that pelvis tip forward and back. Letting the whole spine move into that extension as we arch and lift the tailbone. Flexion as we round and tuck the tailbone. Let's head to down dog. Find that neutral spine here. Gently hug those pelvic points in toward each other as we tuck the toes. Your whole pelvis is going to lift straight up in that neutral position. You can always walk the feet in to shorten the stance. So pelvis stays neutral, knees stay bent. We can feel that nice neutral spine. Big breaths into the side and back ribs as you press down into the fingertips. Walk your hands back towards your feet. Happy squat, belly toward the thighs. Let's press the ground away, rise up with our neutral spine. Now we're gonna have hands front and back of the pelvis, holding that bowl still so we don't tip or tuck. Pick up the left foot, hip flexion, doesn't matter how high it goes. Step it forward, load that left foot, pick up the right foot, hip flexion. Now really pay attention to any of that movement where the pubic bone is or where the tailbone is. Can we hold that upright bowl as we walk or march forward? When you get to the front of the mat, we'll do our sun salutation 1. Knees stay soft, reach the arms forward and up. Shoulder blades lift. Exhale, hinge forward, long spine. Right foot steps back, lower the knee, the top of the foot. We lift up, hands come front and back of the pelvis. Gently hug the front hand and back hand toward each other. And then push that right glute forward. So nice active stretch for that right hip flexor. Hands come down, quadruped. Imaginary broom behind your back. We'll tuck the toes, big inhale. Exhale, cinch those pelvic points in as you hover the knees. Hovering quadruped without rounding the back or tucking the tailbone. Knees come back down, untuck the toes, right foot steps forward. Left knee slides in a little bit for that active 90-90. Hands come front and back of the pelvis, compact those hands in toward each other. Like your hand at the front is trying to slightly pull back towards your hand at the sacrum. Left glute is active, pushing forward. Hands come forward. Left foot steps forward to meet the right, bent knee forward fold. Press the ground away, rise up. Armpits lift up toward the ears. Exhale, hinge without tipping or tucking the tailbone. Left foot back, lower the knee but not the toes. We rise up as if our hands were here, compacting the pelvis. This time we do hands behind the head, adding rotation. Turn just the rib cage to the right, push that left glute forward, and come back. So as we rotate to the right, we're isolating the rib cage doing the rotating, but we're really trying not to let the pelvis rotate at all. Hands come down, quadruped. Tuck the toes, big breath in. Exhale, hover your quadruped without rounding the back or tucking the tailbone. Knees come back down, left foot steps forward, right toes stay tucked in that 90-90. Cinch those pelvic points in, hands behind the head. Exhale, rotate your ribs to the left toward that front leg, and then bring it back. Nice and long in the spine, just turning the ribs. Keep zippering pubic bone up to the belly. Hands come forward. Right foot steps forward to meet the left, bent knee forward fold. Press the ground away, rise up. Starting our first sequence. Bend the knees, hinge forward. Right foot steps back. Lower the knee, not the toes. Same start. Hands come front and back of the pelvis. Squeeze those hands in so that bowl stays upright, and then we'll reach the arms up. Armpits lift way up. Notice the angle of the pubic bone and the tailbone. Have we tipped forward? Have we tucked under too much? Feel that upward lift. Hands come down, quadruped. Block comes back to the sacrum. Cinch those pelvic points in. Hover the left knee, but hold that right thigh bone straight up. We circle the hip both ways without the pelvic bowl changing. So try not to tip the tailbone up toward the ceiling or tuck it under. Move the block aside. Left foot steps out to the left into an abductor stretch or inner thigh stretch. Take a couple rocks back and forth. And again, notice the pubic bone and the tailbone. Don't lift the tailbone up, but don't tuck it under either. Can we find that happy medium of a neutral pelvis? Come back to quadruped. We've got a transition where we're going to lower onto our left hip and left forearm facing the side of the mat. So we lower onto that left hip. Left forearm is parallel to the front of the mat. Really secure that left shoulder blade. Zipper the pubic bone up. Right hand is going to come to this left knee, the bottom knee. And we're just kind of hovering the right knee so that it's off the left knee. We pull it forward into flexion. Extend it back. That's probably going to be so small. Pull it forward. Bring it behind you. Our goal is to hold that pelvic bowl still. So make the movement of the hip forward and back as small as it needs to be to not tuck on the way forward and tip on the way back. So we're trying for no movement in the low back. Warming up that right hip a little more. Good, stack the knees. We're coming back to quadruped, so adjust and head back to quadruped. Now we stay on the right hand, right knee, left foot steps back. Now we're facing the other side of the mat, modified side plank. You can keep this left hand kind of cupping the left side of the pelvis. You can even bring it to the front of the pelvis as we float the left leg. Tiny little lift and lowers if you'd like, or just hold still. So if you're adding that lift of the left leg, that's hip abduction again. The leg moves away from the body, but can we do this without the pubic bone moving or the tailbone moving? Back to quadruped, hands and knees. Tuck the toes, big breath in. Exhale, hover your quadruped without rounding the back or tucking the tailbone. Lower the knees, inhale. Exhale, hover like a broom is taped behind you. Try not to round the spine. Tap the knees down. Inhale one more time. Exhale, hover. We lift all the way up into down dog. Take a moment in your down dog. Feel the ribs lift up toward the body so we're not sinking the chest or the shoulders down. Walk the hands back toward the feet. Happy squat. Press the ground away. Rise up. We're going to add on to this walk forward. Hands cup around the side of the pelvis. Abduct the left hip. Bring it back in and then flex it. Pull the thigh up. Step it forward and load that left foot. Abduct the right hip out to the right. Bring it down. Pull it forward. Hip flexion. So go any pace, as small as it needs to be to hold that pelvic bowl still, not only tipping forward and back, but side to side. Try not to hike the hip up. And when you come to the front of the mat, we'll do that sequence on the second side. Arms reach forward and up. Hinge forward without rounding or arching. Left foot steps back. Lower the knee, but not the toes. Hands come front and back of the pelvis. Squeeze the front hand toward the back hand. Active in that left glute. Hold the pelvis steady as we reach the arms up. Big lift up of the armpits, the shoulder blades, the rib cage. Hands come down, quadruped. Block balances on the sacrum. Imaginary broom behind you. Let's hover the right knee without that left hip sitting out to the left. So as we circle the right hip, we're mobilizing that right side, but stabilizing the left side. So that left outer hip really has to work. Circle both ways. We're trying to keep that left thigh bone vertical, not diagonal, sitting out to the left. Knee comes down, move the block aside. Right foot steps back. Right foot steps out to the right. Inner thigh stretch, adductor rocks. Plant that whole right foot down. Big breaths here. Try not to tense the neck or the jaw. Here comes that transition back to quadruped. And then we lower onto the right hip and right forearm. Left hand comes to that right knee for a little stability. We just float the left knee a little bit. Pull forward, hip flexion. Bring it back, hip extension. This is going to be really small. This is all about the pelvis staying still, not how big we can make the leg movement. So notice if we're arching the back on the way back and we're tucking as we come forward. We're trying to limit that motion and just feel this left hip joint pull forward, flexion. Bring it back, extension. Good, lower that left knee, come back to quadruped, hands and knees. This time we're staying on left hand, left knee, right foot steps back, modified side plank. Zipper the pubic bone to the belly, cinch those pelvic points in. You're welcome to float the right leg. You're welcome to add that abduction, lifting the right leg slightly without any tipping in the left side of the pelvis. So hold that left thigh bone still. Hold the left hip and shoulder still. Bring it back to quadruped. Find your neutral spine. Tuck the toes, big breath in. Exhale, hover the knees without tucking the tailbone or rounding the upper back. Lower the knees, inhale. Exhale, hover. Lower the knees, tap down, inhale, one more time. Exhale, hover. Now continue to lift your thigh bones straight up, 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 up. Deep hip flexion, belly to thighs without sinking the chest down. Take a moment here. Walk the hands back toward the feet, happy squat. Big bend in the knees, we rise up. Find your neutral spine. Hands come front and back of the pelvis. We abduct the right hip out to the right. Bring it down and then pull it forward. Step it forward, load that right foot. Abduct the left hip. Bring it down, pull it forward, thigh lifts, hip flexion. How much can we move the hip before the pelvis starts to get involved? So really working on that stability here as we balance the bowl. Good, when you make it to the front, we're gonna do our stream. So we're gonna do that one more time with a little bit more challenge, a little bit more added on. Reach the arms forward and up. Exhale, hinge. Right foot steps back, lower the knee, but not the toes. Rise up 90-90, drawstring those pelvic points in. We're gonna add an arm swing and let the ribs turn right and left. This is really gonna challenge the stability of that pelvic bowl to not turn with the upper body. So keep zippering the pubic bone up, drawing those pelvic points in. It's a small rotation just through the ribs, the thoracic spine. Hands come down or come to fist. Block will come to the sacrum again. Balance it here. Lift your front body up toward that imaginary broom. We're going to slide left toes back. Now hold the right thigh and right hip still as we float the left toes up. Hip ab and adduction. Abduction over to the left. Adduction over to the right. That's probably going to be so small, we don't want to side bend the upper body to the right, so hold the shoulders still. Hold the sides of the body still so one side doesn't get shorter. We're just moving the hip, but we're holding the pelvis steady. Step that left foot all the way out to the left. You can move the block aside. A couple rocks here into that inner thigh stretch. Planting that whole left foot down. Now stay with shoulders over your wrist. Left hand comes behind the head. Lift your front body up again. Turn just the ribs to the left. Thoracic rotation. Bring it back to center. Chest faces down. Turn just the ribs without the pelvic bowl turning. Bring it back one more time. Turn just the ribs, cinch those pelvic points in. Bring it back, hand comes down, knee comes back in for quadruped. Transition onto the left outer hip and left forearm. You can stick with what we did last time, right hand on the inner left knee. Mobilize that right hip forward and back, holding the pelvis still, or take forearm side bridges. Push down to lift that bottom hip up, land with control. Either option, we want to hold that bowl still. So notice if the pubic bone is tipping around or the tailbone is tipping around, and really do your best to stabilize. Working the core to hold the pelvis still. Good, back to quadruped. Now we stay on right hand, right knee, left foot steps back, modified side plank. Of course, you can stay here. You can float the left leg up. Our option to amp it up is to pull the left thigh forward, hip flexion. Extend it back. Stay in whatever range you need to, as small as it is, to not tuck the tailbone here and tip the tailbone here, tipping the pelvis. So we want to hold still, zippering pubic bone to belly, drawstringing in those pelvic points. Back to quadruped. Cat-cow this time. Head to down dog. Big lift of those hip creases and thigh bones. Press into the fingers. Walk the hands back. Happy squat. Big bend in the knees. Rise up. We add on here. Hands cup around the sides of the pelvis. Abduct the left hip. Now cross it over hip adduction into a curtsy squat. Abduct the right hip. Cross it over the midline, land in a curtsy squat. Walk your way forward, holding that pelvis steady. And then from the front of the mat, we just step the right foot back, turn to the right. Goddess pulses. Hands can be front and back of the pelvis, sides of the pelvis. Let's make sure we're not sticking the tailbone out behind us or tucking it under. Just that nice upright position. Good, turn back to the front of the mat. Second, last side, reach the arms up. Exhale, hinge, broom behind your back. Left foot steps back, lower the knee, not the toes. Rise up, neutral spine, zipper the pubic bone. We swing the arms and let the ribs turn. But think about headlights coming out of those pelvic points. Keep your headlights facing forward toward the front of the mat. Don't let those rotate with the upper body. Hands come down, quadruped, block on the sacrum. Right toes slide back, three-legged quadruped. Float the toes, abduct out to the right. Cross it over to the left, hip adduction, ADD. Couple times both ways, cinching those pelvic points in. Hold that left hip and left thigh bone as still as you can. Right foot comes all the way out to the right into that inner thigh stretch. Take a couple rocks here, forward and back. Lengthening through that right inner thigh all the way up to the groin. Now notice if the tailbone is lifting or tucking. Try to find that happy medium. Shoulders over your wrist. Keep the right leg out, right hand behind the head. 3 times we turn the ribs without turning the low back. Bring it back to center. Turn the ribs. Draw those pelvic points in. Bring it back. One more. Thoracic rotation without the low back turning. Hand comes down, knee comes down. We transition onto the outer right hip, right forearm. Option to do what we did in the first sequence. Pull forward, extend back, hip flexion and extension, or lift up, forearm side bridge. Either way, we're zippering pubic bone to the belly, feeling these 2 pelvic points cinch in. Working that outer right hip if you're doing those forearm side bridges. Back to quadruped, hands and knees. We stay on left hand, left knee, right foot steps back, modified side plank. Stabilize everywhere. Option is to pull the right thigh forward, hip flexion. Extend it back. Pull it forward. Extend it back. But we're holding the pubic bone and the tailbone still. Lower to quadruped. Cat-cow a couple times, moving the pelvis, moving the spine out of that neutral position. Down dog, pelvis stays neutral as we lift the pelvis straight up. Press into the fingers, lift the ribs, big breaths. Walk it back, happy squat. Load the heels, rise up with our neutral spine. Hands cup around the sides of the pelvis. Abduct the right hip, cross it over the midline, hip adduction, curtsy squat, both knees bend. Left hip abducts, cross it over, curtsy squat. Walk your way forward. When you get to the front of the mat, we're going to step left foot back. Turn to the side of the mat, feet are parallel this time. Hands can come to the thighs, or you can bring your fingers poking into the hip crease as we side lunge. Picture that broom behind your back, that slight zippering up of the pubic bone to the belly. So we're not lifting the tailbone or tucking it. Pelvic bowl stays neutral. Let's turn to the front of the mat for quadruped. We're going to try some pelvic circles to mobilize the bowl. So hold the ribs still, hold the shoulders still. Can we circle the pelvis like we have a marker attached to our tailbone? And just try to circle a couple times both directions, finding some mobility and freedom in the pelvis instead of holding that really stable neutral position. Both directions. Good. From here, you can end in a seated position. You can end all the way on your back. Feel free to use a block to make it more supported under the head or even under the sacrum. You can be totally still. You can add any last little hip mobility, maybe letting the knees drop out and in, a little external rotation, internal rotation. You can take a quick figure four if you feel like the hips need a little bit more stretch or movement. But wherever you are, feel free to close your eyes. Soften your forehead. Unclench your jaw. Take at least a few breaths here where you really focus on expanding the breath into the ribs, bringing in as much new air as you can. And just softly exhaling however it feels good today, nose or mouth. Whenever you're ready to finish up your practice, send one grateful thought out into the universe.